My name is Jis, I'm 16 years old, and my life is currently a waking nightmare. But before the absolute disaster of an evening struck, I was actually having a great time. I was at a crowded house party, standing next to the food table with a glass of juice in my hand. It had been so long since I was able to just let loose and enjoy myself. The night felt incredibly good, and there was just one thing left to make it absolutely perfect. I was going to make my crush mine. I spotted him standing across the room, Jad, the guy I'd been admiring from afar. When I saw him actually glance in my direction, I could feel my heart completely flutter. I was busy immersing myself in a daydream where it was only Jad and me, when a boy with a mouth full of metal braces suddenly popped up right in front of my face, totally startling me. It was my classmate, Harry. He flashed a mocking smile and loudly teased that it was time for Mommy's little princess to go to bed. I had no idea what on earth he was talking about. Then I noticed everyone in the room rushing toward the front window. I jostled my way through the crowd and peeked down at the front yard. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. The beyond cringy woman standing down there, holding a literal speakerphone, was none other than my mom. Her voice boomed through the speaker as she announced to the entire party that it was 10 p.m. She loudly reminded me that it was my turn to stay with her tonight, and actually whined that she wouldn't be able to sleep without me. I desperately wished for a way to just evaporate right then and there. It was way too embarrassing. But through the humiliation, a sudden realization hit me. How did my mom even know I was here? I immediately looked across the room and locked eyes with a girl giving me a defiant smirk. It was Christine. Everyone knew she had a massive crush on Jad too, and would play dirty to get him. She was definitely the snitch. After that humiliating exit from the party, I found myself trapped in the passenger seat of my mother's car. I sat there with my arms firmly crossed over my chest and a deep scowl on my face, while she just drove and whistled happily, as if she hadn't just completely ruined my life. It was beyond frustrating. To really understand my current nightmare, you have to know a bit about my family. This crazy woman who birthed me also has 2 older kids, my sister Patty and my big brother Will. I guess we all turned out all right, but that definitely wasn't down to Mom. She didn't raise us at all. Our nanny, Randy, did. Mom used to be an actress, and she was always endlessly busy with her career and her numerous flings, which is exactly why all 3 of us siblings have different fathers. Luckily, because we had Randy to take care of us, I never felt like I was missing out on anything growing up. Honestly, having to see my mom all day is a completely new problem for me. About a month ago, she suddenly decided to retire from acting and move right in with me and my sibling. Who knew that an out-of-date star could turn into such a childish, clingy nightmare? She absolutely hated being alone, so she insisted that Patty and I take turns sleeping next to her every single night. She even forced all 3 of us to accompany her to the mall, treating us like her personal luggage gophers and making us keep her company while she went in for her zillionth beauty treatment of the week. Her clinginess was already exhausting, but it quickly escalated to ruining our lives. One day, after a draining trip to the mall where I was left holding armfuls of her shopping bag, we walked through the front door only to have Will rush over to us. He was furious, shouting and demanding to know why she had tampered with his laptop. It turned out that my brother had applied to the Juilliard Institute, one of the most prestigious art schools in New York, but Mom had somehow gotten onto his computer and deleted the school's acceptance email, meaning poor Will had completely missed the deadline to respond. Instead of feeling guilty, Mom just gave him this calm look. She sweetly claimed she didn't mean to do it, explaining that she was just trying to send an email to report some scammers she saw on the TV shopping channel, and must have accidentally deleted his message in the process. Then she casually linked her arm through his and told him it was probably a good thing anyway. She suggested it would be much better for him to apply for an economics major at a state university so our family wouldn't have to be apart. Will was absolutely devastated, he yelled, asking if she had any idea how hard it was to get into a school like that. Completely overwhelmed and saying he was just done with her, he stormed off to his room. After Will stormed off, dinner with Mom that night was incredibly awkward. It was just the 2 of us sitting there in silence, and I had no idea where Patty was. After we finished eating, I was walking past Patty's bedroom when I heard a soft whimpering sound. I peeked through the gap in the door and saw Will sitting with her, trying his best to calm her down. Between her sobs, Patty cried that her boyfriend James was now insisting on breaking up with her. She blamed the whole situation on Mom, explaining that if Mom hadn't shown up at Patty's office and bragged to everyone that her daughter was dating the manager, the gossip wouldn't have reached her boss, and they wouldn't be in this huge mess. Will jumped to his feet in total agreement. He angrily pointed out that Mom had never cared about them before, but now she felt entitled to just waltz back into their lives and ruin everything. He declared that he had had enough and suggested that since he and Patty were both over 18, they should just pack up and move out. Panic completely took over me. Seeing the determined looks in their eyes, I knew I couldn't let that happen. I rushed into the room, pleading with them not to go. I frantically reminded them that I wasn't 18 yet and begged them not to leave me trapped alone with Mom. They both gasped in surprise when I burst in. After a tense moment of silence, Will finally relented and promised they wouldn't leave. However, He insisted they needed to get things back to normal, meaning back to the days when it was just the three of us and our nan, Randy, living in the house. Will came up with a plan to pull a series of pranks designed to annoy Mom so much that she would eventually pack her bags and leave on her own. Since my siblings were both swamped with work and studying, the actual execution of these pranks fell entirely on my shoulder. I was more than ready to do my part. My first target was her cola addiction. It was obvious how obsessed she was from the massive pile of empty cans she hoarded, and she frequently made midnight dashes to the convenience store whenever she ran out. My strategy was simple. I secretly hid all her freshly bought cola over and over again, expecting her to get totally frustrated. Instead, she stayed bizarrely calm, acting like it wasn't a big deal at all. She actually went out and bought one of those ridiculous drinking helmets, just to ensure her soda was physically attached to her head at all times. My first attempt was a complete failure. Moving on to plan B, I decided to hide the Nintendo Switch. Every single night, Mom forced us to play on that console with her. Honestly, she was the worst player in the world, but her ego wouldn't let her accept defeat. She would trap us there, making us play those boring games for hours until she finally won. I hid the console with a mischievous smile, figuring that without it, we would finally have some peace. I couldn't have been more wrong. With no video games to occupy her time, she started coming up with even dumber things to force us to do with her. Suddenly, Patty was roped into teaching her how to cook. I was drafted into doing gardening with her, and Will was forced to do couples yoga. The forced family bonding from all that cooking, gardening, and yoga was driving us absolutely crazy. So we held an emergency meeting in Patty's room to figure out our next move. Patty heavily sighed and complained that having Mom around was exactly like caring for a toddler. She said the constant need for care and attention was just completely exhausting. Will aggressively agreed, stating he couldn't bear it for another second. Then he turned his frustration on me. He accused me of not carrying out the tricks properly and claimed I was actually making the situation much worse. He haughtily declared that he and Patty would just have to take over and get the job done themselves. I was incredibly offended by that. I snapped back at them, telling them that if they were so smart, they were more than welcome to try and do it better. So they did. They decided to exploit Mom's ultimate weakness, her intense fear of spiders. Usually, even a teeny tiny spider was enough to send her scrambling onto a chair in pure terror until one of us came to the rescue and removed. Following Patty's instructions, I bought a bunch of realistic fake spiders online, and she strategically hid them all over the house. Later that day, the three of us hid behind the living room curtains to spy on Mom as she walked over to open the snack cupboard. We waited for the inevitable scream, but it never came. Instead of panicking when she saw the fake spider, she just calmly picked it up and casually tossed it over her shoulder. It flew right toward our hiding spot, which sent the three of us screaming and scrambling in absolute terror instead. Since Patty's brilliant idea was a total bust, Will decided it was his turn to take action. He hatched a plan for the following evening. My job was to distract our nanny, Randy, and get her out of the house for a few hours. Meanwhile, Will was going to throw a massive feast at home and then swiftly drag all his friends out, leaving a catastrophic mess behind. Even though Mom never lifted a finger to clean anything, she was actually a huge neat freak. So Will figured the absolute chaos would definitely drive her crazy. But just like every other attempt, it completely backfired. When Will and Patty finally came back home to check on the damage, they didn't find Mom having a nervous breakdown. Instead, they walked in to find Randy diligently cleaning up the entire mess in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Mom was comfortably lounging on the sofa in her pajamas, thoroughly enjoying herself while I nervously applied a soothing face mask on her. I shot my siblings a highly guilty look as they stared at me in pure disbelief. And of course, just like always, I was the one who ended up getting all the blame again. Later that evening, the blame game continued. My siblings cornered me out by the garden swing to interrogate me about my latest failure. Will was visibly frustrated, demanding to know why I hadn't kept Randy away from the house for the entire day like I had promised. I whined defensively, explaining that I really did ask Randy to drive me over to my dad's house, but halfway there, she realized she had forgotten her phone and absolutely insisted on turning back. Patty rolled her eyes and completely cut me off. Sounding incredibly annoyed, she told me to stop making excuses. She harshly called me useless, complaining that I always did things by half. She even brought up the previous prank, arguing that the spider trick only failed because I was cheap and had bought ones that looked way too obviously fake. Will immediately backed her up, taking it a step further. He actually accused me of being secretly bought off by Mom and aggressively demanded that I spill the truth. I stood there completely disgusted. I couldn't believe my own siblings were seriously accusing me of betrayal right to my face. I finally snapped. I yelled that I had had enough and told them that if they thought they were really that good at getting rid of Mom, they could just do it all themselves from now on. Without wasting another word on either of them, I turned on my heel and stormed off. I was still fuming from their ridiculous accusations the next morning. I was trying to relax in the living room and watch Netflix, but I couldn't even do that in peace because Patty and Will were having a screaming match upstairs. It turned out Patty had let her boyfriend use her car, and he had completely forgotten to pick her up for work. She was desperately trying to borrow Will's bike so she wouldn't be late for a meeting, but Will flat out refused because he had an important dance workshop to attend. Patty viciously mocked his class, claiming they just repeated the same dumb wriggling moves anyway. She told him to just take the bus, arguing that being a little late wouldn't kill him. Will shot back that it wasn't his fault her gold-digging boyfriend had left her stranded in her own car, adding that she should have broken up with the jerk ages ago. They kept yelling back and forth until Will finally stormed downstairs. He angrily shouted that she could just take it, complaining that no one had ever been able to stop Bossy Patty from doing what she wanted anyway. He headed straight outside to his bike, then came back inside a few minutes later and marched right back upstairs. I just assumed he had gone out to get some air and cool down. I groaned, wondering if those two would ever give it a rest. How were we supposed to figure out a way to get rid of Mom when they couldn't even go a single day without bickering? Right at that moment, Mom walked into the living room. She cheerfully announced that she was going to bake the cake Patty had taught her how to make yesterday, but realized she had forgotten to buy eggs. She wondered out loud if Will needed his bike today, suggesting she could borrow it just for a quick trip to the store. I thought this was a brilliant solution. If Mom took the bike, my annoying siblings would have absolutely nothing left to squabble over. I quickly encouraged her to take it, confidently lying that Will had said he was going to take the bus today, and pointing out that cycling to the grocery store would be much faster anyway. Mom hopped on the bike and shakily rode off. A little while later, Will and Patty finally came out to the yard and immediately noticed the bike was missing. When I casually mentioned that Mom had already taken it, Will stopped dead in his track. The color completely drained from his face as he confessed the truth. When he went outside earlier, he had purposefully broken the brakes so Patty wouldn't be able to use it. Panic instantly set in. Patty frantically tried calling Mom, but she didn't pick up. A few agonizing minutes later, my phone rang. It was our nanny, Randy. She panicked and told us that Mom had crashed the bike and was currently in the hospital. We rushed there immediately, terrified of what we were going to find. Fortunately, it could have been much worse. She had only suffered a severe ligament sprain, but the doctor said she had to wear a thick bandage to stabilize her leg for an entire month. Knowing that we had literally caused the crash, we were consumed by guilt. Because this was entirely our fault, we had absolutely no choice but to cave to Mom's every single demand once she got home from the hospital. She immediately insisted that I spoon-feed her every single one of her meals. When I pointed out that there was absolutely nothing wrong with her hands, she dramatically claimed that the trauma to her leg had affected her entire body. My siblings didn't have it any easier. She made Patty light loads of candles, play soothing melodies, and constantly rearrange the bedroom furniture just so she could have the perfect, relaxing space to heal. Meanwhile, she got Will to download all of her old movies and actually made him hand-feed her popcorn while she watched her past performances on repeat. Of course, we were genuinely worried about her and desperately hoped she would recover as soon as possible. But honestly, her ridiculous demands were starting to go way too far. Then, after a few weeks of this torture, she insisted that we all go out for a family picnic, loudly complaining that sitting inside all day was making her severely depressed. To cure her supposed depression, we packed up and headed to a nice picnic site exactly like she had asked. While we were walking along a grassy slope, I purposely dropped my bag and bent down to pick it up. I deliberately forgot to lock the wheelchair's wheels and let out a loud, dramatic gasp as I watched Mom whiz down the hill. But instead of crashing, she immediately hopped right out of the moving chair and landed on her feet, looking perfectly fine. Will and Patty stared in absolute confusion at her stunt-like recovery. I wasn't surprised at all, though, because I was the one who had set this whole thing up to finally expose her. I confronted her right then and there. I told her that Randy had already confessed everything to me. I knew our nanny had been secretly helping Mom dodge all of our pranks, and had even helped her stage that completely fake bike accident. I demanded to know why she felt the need to make our lives so incredibly difficult, angrily asking if she had ever actually cared about us at all. As soon as the words left my mouth, Mom burst into tears and completely poured her heart out. She explained that after her acting career ended, all the fortune, glory, friends, colleagues, and even the men who had promised to love her forever had turned their backs on her. She confessed how extremely lonely she was, and that she desperately needed us, her children, now more than ever. She cried that she only had the three of us left. She admitted she knew she had failed her responsibilities as a mother in the past and had let us all down, but she swore she finally realized her mistakes. She begged us to forgive her, explaining that she only did all those crazy things because she wanted to draw us back close to her. Randy gently stepped in, asking us to give our mom a chance. She explained that although mom's actions were definitely misguided, she only did those things out of genuine care for us. Randy revealed that mom had been terrified that my partying was causing me to neglect my study. She had sabotaged Will because she didn't want his dancing dreams leading him straight into the same toxic showbiz nightmares she had lived through. And as for Patty, Randy insisted that mom was actually right all along. Mom guiltily explained the truth. She had once caught Patty's boyfriend, James, secretly dating the company reception. She had intentionally made that massive fuss at Patty's office, just to scare the other woman away. She admitted that the aftermath hadn't gone the way she expected at all, and had accidentally led to a terrible mess. Listening to her explain everything with such deep remorse, my siblings and I felt our anger completely melt away. We couldn't help but feel a wave of sympathy for her, and finally understood where she was coming from. Once we all understood her true intentions, especially the truth about Patty's terrible boyfriend, we decided to team up and finish what she had started. We tracked James, or rather Patty's ex-boyfriend, down to a local coffee shop to catch him red-handed. We made absolutely sure he paid a worthy price for his actions. I watched with pure satisfaction as Patty confidently marched over to where he was sitting with his new girlfriend and dumped a giant bag of his clothes right over his head. The look of sheer shock on both of their faces was completely priceless. With justice finally served, Patty rejoined us at our table, and we could all actually relax and enjoy being a family. Everything has completely changed since that day. Patty and Mom are getting along so much better now. Honestly, they look more like an endearing pair of sisters than a mother and daughter. Will even bought Mom tickets to one of his upcoming contemporary dance shows, wanting her to see firsthand just how important his passion is to him. As for me, I might be the youngest in the family, but I know that when my siblings are busy, it's my job to make sure Mom has someone to lean on. Surprisingly, I'm genuinely glad to take on this role. Sitting there at the coffee shop, laughing and talking cheerfully together, I realized that having my mom around isn't actually so bad after all.